Hello everybody, Timothy Bailey with Project Learn and our video for today. Today we are going to look at something called modal verbs. You might also hear them referred to as helping verbs or auxiliary verbs. The easiest way to think of them is that they're the assistant verbs. They help out our main verbs, such as our action verbs. Okay, they're words such as should and must and ought. And they're used at different times and in different ways. So let's go ahead and start looking and see if we can't figure out how to use our modal verbs. We're going to start by looking at can and may. In a previous video, we talked about can and may. We're going to look at these two young ladies here, Chloe and Amy. Okay, so they are at the park walking either their dogs or somebody's dogs. If you remember from a previous video, can should be about ability. Okay, I pointed out that native speakers often do not do this. They use can to also mean permission. But may should be the permission word that you are using, and can should be the ability word. So let's imagine that Chloe is talking to her mom, and Chloe says, "Mom, can I go to the park with Amy?" Here's Amy. Now, if her mom was sarcastic or was a grammar teacher, right, such as I am, she might say, "Yes, you do have that ability," right? So she's not giving her permission. She's saying, yes, that is something you're able to do, right? But as a parent, as a mom, she hasn't given Chloe the permission. So Chloe needs to then say, instead, "Mom, may I go to the park with Amy?" Now, Chloe is not asking, is she able to do that? She's asking, is she allowed to do that? And Chloe's mom might say, yes, you are allowed to go to the park with your friend. Okay? So can and may. So get some more. So we have could, would, and may. These three, could, would, and may, are all about request. At least in this, what we're looking at now is about request. One thing you'll notice is that the modal verbs might be used in more than one situation. So now we are looking at a request. So we have two boys here in school. Bert on the left with the orange and white shirt, and Ernie on the right with the blue shirt. And Ernie's pencil broke, right? I know it doesn't look broken, but let's imagine that his pencil broke while he was doing some work. So he needs to borrow a pencil from Bert. Notice that Ernie doesn't have another pencil. Bert is prepared. Bert has two pencils. So Ernie might say, "Bert, could I borrow a pencil?" Good, right? Is this something that I can do? I'm requesting to borrow a pencil. Will you allow me to borrow a pencil? Right, I have made that request. Ernie might also say, "Bert, may I borrow a pencil?" Right? Do I have your permission to borrow, to use one of your pencils? Now the third one, would, is sometimes more difficult to use in a question. Right? "Bert, would I be able to borrow a pencil?" Right? Notice we can't say, "Bert, would I borrow a pencil?" Right? That's a strange question. It's not asking to use the pencil. We often use would when we're talking ourselves, right? I would like to borrow a pencil from you. The problem with that is sometimes it doesn't sound as polite. I would like to do this. I would like you to do this for me. Right? So in terms of requesting something, the easiest two to use are could and may. Would often needs some other words and some manipulation of your sentence to make it make sense. So I suggest could and may. Must, should, and ought to. Here's a lady, right, doing some studying, doing some homework, preparing for a test of some kind, probably. Here we're looking at obligation. Obligation is what you need to do. You are required to do. So, for example, as a student, you are supposed to, required to, expected to study. So this lady might say, I must study for my test. This is something that she has to do. She is expected to do, right? To study. Maybe she expects it of herself. Now, you might also hear people say, I have to study for my test. And this, have to, will often sound like have to. I have to study for my test. Right? This is a little bit more informal language here, right? The three words here are a little bit better to use. Now, the difference between must and should and ought to is a lot of the time speakers use these two to a lesser obligation than must, to a lesser degree than must. So imagine the lady here really wants to go to this party. There's a party of some kind, but she has to study for her test. So she might say, I should study for my test. The obligation here is a little bit less than if she says, I must, right? She seems more focused on studying. Here, well, and we might even begin it by changing our voice or using a word like well. Well, I should study for my test, but I guess I'll go to the party, right? Or something like that. Maybe her friends are pressuring her. Come on, you can study anytime. The party's right only tonight. Same with ought to, right? I ought to study for my test, but maybe I'm not going to, right? So should and ought to often tell us obligation that we maybe don't really want to do or are not going to do, whereas must is a much stronger word, right? We seem more determined that we will do whatever our obligation is. Also, ought to is not as frequent in American English. It may be more frequent in other Englishes around the world, so you're more likely to hear should or must. All right, so we have must again and should. Here's an airplane, a jet blue airplane. Here we are looking at logical conclusion. That means something that makes sense if we just think about it. His flight left at 8 o'clock, so he must be there by now. Okay, maybe it's 10 o'clock and the flight was only a couple hours. So we know this person must be where they were going to by now, right? Unless there was some sort of a problem. We might also say his flight left at 8 o'clock, so he should be there by now. Just like the last examples, here must is more certain that this makes sense, that this should be true. Should, however, would lead us to believe that, well, maybe there's some doubt. So maybe it's Christmas time or it's winter time with severe weather, so we're not entirely confident that he, in fact, will be there. So we're not going to say must, right? There's wind, there's snow. We're going to say here should. His flight left at 8 o'clock, so he should be there by now. Unless there's snow or something else, right? And that would be the thought that we're putting in here by using should, even if we do not say it. This is difficult for people learning English. A lot of things we put into a sentence, meaning by changing our voice, not even by the words that we use as much, okay? All right. Can, could, might, may, and will. Here we have some water cutting through the ground, right? Here we're talking about possibility, something that may or may not happen. This, what we're looking at here in the picture, is called erosion. Erosion is the noun. So, water can erode the ground. In general, this is able to happen. Here, can, for possibility, means it's something that, generally speaking, is able to happen. Water could erode the ground. This is somewhat possible. It could or it could not. Okay, depends on the ground, how much water, all of that. Right? It could do this. Water might erode the ground. Here, it is more possible than could. Still, it's possible it won't do it, right? Just more possible than could. Water may erode the ground. Here, it's even more possible than could or might, right? We're pretty sure that water will erode the ground, but there's still the small possibility that it will not. And now let's look at will. So water will erode the ground. This has two possibilities. One is that we are certain or almost certain this will happen. The other thing is this sentence, we could be just talking about the future. For example, we in the beginning might add, in 10 years, water will erode the ground, or this water will erode the ground. We could do that. Okay, so very certain and the future. All right, let's look at some sentences. See if you can put the words in there. Blank, you pass me the salt. Could you pass me the salt? Would you pass me the salt? Right, both of those are good. Okay. Can you would work as well. Are you able to pass me the salt? I blank love to go on the trip, but I am broke. Broke means I don't have enough money or any money, right? I would love to go on the trip, right? But I am broke. This is the only one, the best one really for this. Her brother blank want to go. I'm not sure. Right? So the key here is this part, right? I'm not sure. So her brother might want to go, right? On the trip, for example. I'm not sure. Or her brother may want to go. I'm not sure. You would also hear that one. I blank pay my taxes. This is something that you are required to do. Keep that in mind, right? I must pay my taxes. Maybe I don't really want to. I should pay my taxes, but I'm not going to, blah, blah, blah. Or I ought to pay my taxes, right? Maybe I'm talking about the future or this year in the future when it's tax season. I might also say, I will pay my taxes. Last one, blank, I use your truck this weekend to move. I need to borrow your truck. May I use your truck this weekend to move? Or could I use your truck this weekend to move? All right, I hope those were helpful. The next time you're looking at modal verbs such as this, think about how you're using them and what are you trying to say. Here are a couple links. Thank you and have a great day.